Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast. My name is Jason Walls from QA Cafe, and I'm here once again with Dave Taht because lots happened over the last year or so since we talked, and I think it's time that we dive back into all that again because we talk about cowboys of the cowboys and weirdos in networking, and I feel like you know.
The
It's
rock
like
and roll stars.
you can't get deeper, right? The rock and roll stars. You can't get deeper into the guts of what's really going on in the internet without talking to Dave. So,
Well, thanks for
oh
having me
man,
on again, Jason.
yeah, no, definitely. I had such a great time last time, and it was like kind of a no-brainer to do it again. So, as always, this podcast is brought to you by my employers at QA Cafe, and the views expressed by David or myself do not reflect theirs in any fashion. Um, And the same goes with Dave. And we are brought to you by our three great products at QA Cafe, and that includes CD Router, the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi devices, and other customer premises equipment, with thousands of test cases pre-written by experts in a fully automated test platform that drops right into whatever you're doing, works with your CI/CD environment, make sure that you are developing the best possible products for your customers. And it does performance testing too, with some latency metrics.
Yay.
With some metrics, it doesn't. Yeah.
Well, there's been a
uh,
lot of good. Go ahead. There's been a
no,
lot
go
of good
ahead.
work on a variety of metrics over the past couple of years. TR471 just got approved, which has some stuff in
Oh,
it.
I do want to talk about that too. Absolutely want to talk about that because that came up again. That second product that we make is CloudShark, which is the way to deliver enterprise-grade packet capture analysis to your entire organization. As we've found that using the hodgepodge of open source tools that are out there, even the most powerful ones like Wireshark, is not really something that translates well into deploying across an entire organization. So we help put that together for people in a way that has simple licensing and is as accessible to new users as it is to experts. And then finally, Packet Viewer, which is the power behind CloudShark, will let you add packet capture analysis capability to any cloud managed networking or cybersecurity product. All right. So yeah, it's funny. So before the show started, we were like, "Oh, what are we going to talk about?" And it's like, "Oh, we should talk about this. Oh, we should talk about this. Oh, we should talk about this. Oh, we should start the show."
Well, you have a whole variety of topics. Hit me. I
Yeah. Well,
haven't.
so
Go ahead.
I mostly wanted, like following, and some of this is algorithm throwing stuff in my face, but I really have a sense that the uh, the latency topic and the latency situation, right, is now becoming more top of mind to people in a way that, and I really feel like it's sort of been over the last year or so, right? And there are some, it's now becoming a topic that people are talking about sort of externally and in the actual B2B world and in the actual, maybe not to the consumer yet, but the regulators are listening to it. The companies are actually listening to this idea of the things that actually make the internet slow, right? Right. So I wanted to talk about the evolution of that over the past year because a
Last
lot of
year.
things have happened, right, with standardization
Yeah.
and with the stuff that you're working on and everything.
All right. So several big things that have happened. L4S is now being deployed.
Yeah.
That is a interesting and different. It has two things that are really good about it. One thing is highly experimental, and I'm looking forward to getting more benchmarks back from the deployment. The really good thing about it is that it finally applies AQM technologies to the downstream, which means that your downstream latency on those L4S services is going to be consistently fairly low. That's really good stuff. The experimental part, and that's the one that gets all the press, is this thing called high-speed ECM marking. And that involves having to have applications mark bits specially and expect to get a better result by doing so. And it kind of has a chicken and the egg problem. First, you have to have services that use it, then you have to have
Right.
the services available. So long as L4S is in early deployment, I hope to see some interesting new applications like the core goal has been to do gaming, cloud gaming in particular, but AR and
Right.
VR applications will also benefit. So I hope that they start demonstrating some killer apps for it.
Yeah. Well, it's so I ended up talking about this and then writing about it separately. We're talking about Matter, but just this idea that and especially with standards, but this idea that things don't happen until there's this sort of like perfect storm of the market need and the standard being ready and the industry being ready to be like, "Oh, okay, I guess we have to do this," right?
Yeah,
And when those three things happen, like it's this huge snowball effect. And it just starts like the ball rolling, right? And one of those things is major use cases, right?
hmm
And you brought up cloud gaming, but like I guess I am I am always convinced that the reason why big companies will start to pay attention to something like this, um, because you see all the news with like Xfinity and L4S and their low latency service, right? And actually talking about it that way in a way like, actually using those words to consumers is amazing in itself, right? And
yes.
so if they're talking about it, then there was a use case. There is definitely a use case that has come up, right? At least one. And so like they know they're going to have to start doing this because that use case is going to be something that people demand, right?
I have some hope that the perfect storm is rising. I have to kind of point out that my stuff, the FQ Colo and the cake stuff, generally outperforms L4S in the general case. So
Right.
I'm very, go to people that want to go for us, but hey, check out my stuff, and we'll see who wins. But
Well,
having
yeah, but at
anybody
least
care at
like
all, yeah, go ahead.
the influence of the stuff that you have done has
Yeah.
has played into the stuff that the standardized things that people have done. Like absolutely,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, going to the Matter thing. Matter's been around for a while, and trying to see them make Matter matter has involved trying to get a bunch of router manufacturers that actually support it. And
Right.
my principal kvetch with it is that they really need to go bottom up now by making the Matter stuff readily available in OpenWRT and things like that. And if they do a push
Yeah.
that way, we will hopefully get to a perfect storm of that as well. The IoT universe is terrifying. and,
So it's
and
just because it's the same thing, it's the perfect storm doesn't happen a lot when it's almost the culture is fragmented, right? It's like when the technology has come from so many different places of people who would never ever consider aren't even aware of the other use cases, right? Like IPv6, right?
oh boy, there's been a pretty good backlash against IPv6, especially in the last year. A lot of people in
Yeah.
America have just given up, which is a shame because all the non-English speaking countries are going full bore on it,
Oh
and
yeah. And
they
they have
have
been
to.
for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's outside the United States. There's a perfect storm there swirling away, and we're a backwater. We're an IPv4 backwater.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it's just like to make the analogy between smart home stuff, because I've talked about that perfect storm before, where it's like it came from appliance manufacturers and DIY and all this stuff, but it was never going to take off that way because nobody who would buy it from that industry is the kind of person that would understand enough to set it up unless they are a developer, right? Not a
Yes.
software developer, a literal like
Yeah.
building developer, right? Um, and so to bring it back to the latency stuff, it's the same sort of thing. It's like the people who have been paying attention to this for so long are are and were in an entirely different world from the people who have needed it for so long, right?
So yes, I completely agree. And part of it is just making people want it. I've become a bit of a Luddite. I don't really want my electrical wall switches connected to a smart anything because the wall switch just works.
It's
um,
actually true. Like that's actually
it's,
they did some studies that people would rather go to the wall and touch something than take out their phone
yeah,
or say stuff out loud.
it's kind of cultural. And I'm not
Yeah.
real huge on my my refrigerator becoming a DOS vector or a part of a botnet. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that there is also some backlash against overly smart devices. And
Right.
that's hopefully something that Matter will begin to address. But I don't know. The future is obscure.
Well, is there anything that you can use on the boat there? I had no idea that you'd be joining me from.
Yeah, I've been hiding out on my boat here for some time. Yes and no. For example, we all rely very much on tablets with GPS and charts now. So that's tremendously, amazingly useful. There's another really cool app I use. It's called Anchor Alert, which basically it alerts me at home if I'm on the boat or elsewhere that my boat's anchor is drifting. Um,
Well,
so those two are tremendously useful utilities, but they just rely on the regular internet actually, they mostly rely on local resources because you don't have the internet when you're on a boat.
I was going to ask.
um,
So, like, are you in an entirely different sort of connectivity situation when
that's
you're out
something else
there?
that's getting a lot of people. I have a Starlink on the boat, but that eats a lot of power. I don't keep that on. 5G works amazingly well, all the way out to about 5 or 10 miles out along most of the coast of
Really?
California. Yeah, almost you'll see this ships coming into the harbor. Everybody gets on the 5G almost immediately, and
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing in the way.
because there's nothing in the way and there's no users pointed that way, so it
Right.
just works. However, I have my godson, and he's very used to being able to stream audio. Therefore, I have to hug the coast in order for him to get his music. Um, we've tremendously got behind the store and forward model of being able to deal with audio files in particular. And
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
I have a box on board that has a huge FLAC collection that I've tediously built up over many years. But he doesn't have that. He doesn't have any ability to create it either. So we've created a society where we're very tied to our services. And
Yeah. It's very true. Yeah.
if you want to get more than 5 miles off the coast, bring a book, and you can get
Won't that be the day?
it's getting scarce. The
Yeah.
Starlink works pretty much everywhere, but my version eats over 50 watts of power, and the whole boat
Right.
itself doesn't use much more than 20 watts,
Yeah.
if that.
Yeah. And last time we talked about the sort of study that you did on them and their latency issues
Well, I
and
didn't do a
how.
study.
Yeah.
I made I made a mean, nasty set of public complaints and formed a group of academic researchers to go make the point. And that group has independently published several different studies. And Starlink listened. They actually put FQColo on their Wi-Fi and some form of AQM on the top end, and that's really helping them. I think it's a key part of their
Right.
growth. They still I'm working on a project right now that has a bunch of Starlinks on a boat, and it turns out that you get a couple thousand people with cell phones against a couple Starlinks. The cell phones win. So we're trying very much to moderate the code for it, moderate the impact of so many phones on a single Starlink. But that's still an extreme situation. They're doing
Right.
great.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So they have a wonderful, I mean, besides my teeny little bits that they've adopted, they've done a really good job across optimizing the network. And I'm incredibly bullish on them. They are going to easily crack 8 million users this year, I think,
Yeah.
worldwide.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah. And
probably will,
it's cool because it kind of simultaneously solves the broadband divide, like
boom.
in a lot of places,
Yeah,
right?
the whole bead thing kind of vanishes. You want $77,000 per passing for fiber, or can you just invest the money and pay for a ton of Starlinks in those kind of remote locations?
Yeah.
So I do hope that whole issue starts getting resolved in a sane fashion. You
Right.
know, they outlined what $44 billion and haven't spent a dime on doing that upgrade, and they have. Uh, 50 states will have better internet, including broadband, including Starlink, including WISP technology, out of that particular process, and I'm happy for
Right.
that.
Well, right. And I wrote about that a couple weeks ago about because the way I end up writing articles on LinkedIn is because I read somebody else's article and it pisses me off, and so I immediately have to be like,
Wow, you don't come across as an angry writer to me. Um,
it's gone through many layers by the time.
So, so what was your piece about?
Well, that one was about just about, the usual stuff that we try to talk about how the end user does not care at all about how or why or where their internet comes from.
Very good point. Yes. I mean,
They only
yes.
care about that experience. And that ties back into what we've always been talking about, where, they don't care what their bandwidth number is. They
No,
don't.
they
They
just
care
care.
whether they experience the things that they're using working or not.
I I took a poll once of people on random people on a train, and I asked 30 plus people if they knew what a packet was. One person got it right. So
Yeah.
outside of our own little circle, nobody understands the inverse square law. They just plug it in and expect it to work.
Yeah.
If you're older, we ask our children, can you make my thing work? And the overall level of how we a copium of how we function in this technological society is really dependent on the engineers getting it as much right as we can in the first place. Because once it passes into the real world, nobody can fix it. So,
No, no, right. And it gets
yeah,
sticky, right? We,
yeah,
we've talked about this before, where it's like, technology takes a long time to change because if there's something in there that's kind of working,
mm-hmm,
most people don't want to experience the pain of it not
yeah.
working for any period of time. And like,
Well, there's been a big, I would say, brouhaha over FAA's technologies and procedures. And,
yeah,
up until a decade or so ago, they were still using vacuum tubes. And they had services and systems that were 100% reliable and redundant, which is another key feature that
yeah,
kept kept everything flying. And we've had decades upon decades of technology stacked upon technology that mostly holds it together. But the people that originally designed the stuff are retired or dead. Um,
right,
it,
right,
it would it would take an enormous and tremendously enormous effort to try to update everything that the FAA uses to even 1990s standards.
right, right,
And
right, right.
it would be very cool if it happened, but it just seems that the knowledge base is very shallow. And you just write a whole application in React, and then you can have an aircraft controller module that handles all this stuff. And I'm very pleased with how good. I took a flight recently with a friend, and the glass cockpit thing is now pretty much standard in private planes. And it has amazing levels of redundancy and multiple inputs. So, like if you have an Airbnb, so you have typically for two pilots, you have two entirely separate systems. And if one is misbehaving, you flip over to the other guy. Um, that level of thinking about how our infrastructure actually works is not really how the web developers of the world think it works.
No, well, it never had to, right? It doesn't have to. And I honestly, Dave, I think about this all the time because I live in a world where there is a level of fault tolerance. I've said that before, right? Especially like, just in writing and marketing and stuff like that. Like sometimes you can follow the 80/20 rule safely in most industries, right? It's like you can push something out there as an MVP, and if there's stuff if there's stuff that's wrong with it, it's okay. You can fix it later. But my late father-in-law was um was an electrical engineer that worked on space station components, right? He has boards that are up there, and he was explaining to me what a zero fault tolerance system is like. And I'm like, I don't ever want to do that in my life.
You have to be very. When I was younger, I was that level of OCD. I really cared about that stuff, but you have to be incredibly. You have to be, what's the word for it? Incredibly pessimistic. You have to red team absolutely everything, because in the end, have you ever heard of the Swiss cheese model? No. Okay.
No,
But by the way,
wait, I think I no, no, go ahead. Yeah,
your viewers might not even know what MVP means, minimum viable product, the first thing you ship out
yeah,
the door. The Swiss cheese model is that you have holes in a slice of cheese, and they get bigger and smaller. But if you have a problem, then maybe you only go through so much of the cheese before you hit a wall. You have another problem, you only go this far. But when it happens, if you get the holes that line up of all your fault tolerance stuff that goes straight through, then you have a failure or a fault. And
right.
There's a guy I watch about airline disasters. His name is Mentor Pilot, and he goes through the incredible chains of events for an accident to eventually happen. And some of them are really trivial. One guy did a walk around and forgot to notice that his airbag still had a sticker on it, and basically he wasn't getting a reliable speed reading, and that in the end caused the crash. But he just missed one thing. Um,
Yeah.
so all of our civilization is dependent upon a bunch of, the internet itself was not designed
The
for what
internet
we do.
itself.
It was a toy network. It was the first network. It was a test network. And we've
Yeah.
scaled it out and built society to be utterly dependent on something that has so many obvious bugs. Um, have you heard about here's another one, the AI scraping crisis. Have you heard of that one yet?
Well, are you talking about like where you're just like the copyright crisis where there's
That's one. Now this is a technical thing. As we evolved the web, when we had minimum amounts of bandwidth available, we taught it to be polite, and we used a file called robots test that
yeah,
would say text, sorry, that
yeah,
basically said don't scrape me or limit your rate. Don't hurt me. I'm just a little server on the edge of nowhere. Well,
yeah.
in the AI's massive hunger for new information, they are ignoring robots.txt and they are spidering down, looking for new data across all of the internet. And it's hurting some of the sites that I love. So, for example, LWN.net just ran an article about it. They are just getting slammed by botnets of AI-based scrapers that are not paying any attention to
Wow.
those rules. And
That's a big deal.
well, yeah. So I'm a rampant AI, and I'm going to suck down all your information all the time. Humans, clicking once at a time, forget about you. It may be we're building the internet for AIs and AIs only.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
So
Well, it kind of seems that way in a little in a small way because I've run into that with because we're basically when it comes to search engine optimization now it's this crazy flip where before you were supposed to design web pages that had very little information on them because the end user was a human and the human is just looking for the thing that they want, right? They're not going to scroll through pages of text and read, you know, it's my rule number one of marketing. Actually, it's on the wall. It's that people don't read, right?
sure.
They don't. They're looking for the context that they're looking for, right? And
Yeah.
so the way you would design a website is to make sure that they're going to get that as easily as possible. The guy from webpages.suck.com used to write about it back in like the early 2000s. And his whole point, like if you read his founding blog of the website, he's like, the best business website in the world is the one where as soon as you go to the URL, money is sucked out of your wallet. Because every step you add makes it more unlikely that people are going to do something. But now, because now you're not building a website for a human, you're building it for the AI. Now it's flipping it on its head because you need to put a lot of text in there so that the AI can summarize it.
We are going to be in a kind of a post AI age. All content generated prior to say 2021 was by humans, and everything else will be generated by AIs. And I'm hoping that we come to an effective balance. I've tried. We have one of our core developers, Herbert, is incredibly good at coaxing AI to give him good answers to programming questions. I get something that sounds beautiful to a C-level executive. I'm like, no, but that won't work. No, that won't work. And I don't know, how do I correct you? How do the humans get a word in on what the summaries are saying? Um,
Yeah,
Hi, I'm the expert on this. You're wrong. To retract
right,
that.
right.
Uh,
And it's interesting because the science behind AI, which we know that it's way more complicated than that. And even saying the word AI isn't really AI right now, right? It's not really. It's a recursive algorithm that is seeking to terminate, right?
it's a gigantic Turing machine, but has a really,
Yeah.
really big loop to it.
Right,
Anyway,
right, right.
continue.
So the how it's affecting other things, right? So let's talk. I experience it with packet captures, right? So you have a lot of people who are just sort of throwing PCAPs at ChatGPT or Deep Search or any of these things, right? DeepSeek or whatever. And it works. It's pretty good at it. But you don't know when it's not because none of these generative AIs ever say, I don't know that. They
Yes,
never say that.
very,
It is their
yeah,
job to terminate that function.
yeah. Well, I'm hoping that people are working on that we don't know. Um, what is it? Donald Rumsfeld. We have the known knowns, the unknown knowns, and the unknown unknowns.
Yeah,
And you're
right.
perilously near trying to clearly define what the unknown unknowns are.
Right. And
By the way,
actually, I mean, ironically, I really feel like stuff like buffer blow is one of those things that was an unknown, right?
it still
Because it was
is.
causing all these problems and nobody was doing anything about it.
Despite being kind of upbeat about the progress inside of my bubble, I get back government reports like from New Zealand, for example, and it pretty much shows 99% buffer bloat, 99.9% buffer bloat throughout that country. And yet I have 10 customers there, but it's just not big enough. So the seed crystal that I've been trying to plant for over 15 years is still only slowly spreading. And maybe, I don't know what the right answer is. Maybe in a decade it won't matter. Um,
Right,
or maybe we'll, in order to try to get away from the AIs, we'll get on boats and sail 5 miles out. So we can have an
right.
original
Yeah.
thought again. So,
Well, it got me
well,
thinking about go ahead.
we had a bunch of things we were going to touch upon. I don't know if we missed anything. Um,
I was going to say, I was going to bring it back to the latency thing for a minute because we were talking
sure.
about um, the killer use cases. That's what I was going to do. I was going to bring the zero failure thing
Ah,
back to latency, right? Because the killer use cases now are those things, so, are those things that eventually we're going to rely on this system that was not built for zero tolerance things. We already do, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, go back to airplanes and cars. And cars, fly-by-wire systems are becoming predominant. There's no connection between the steering wheel and the wheels anymore. And we'll continue to extend that analogy to potentially in government, as we add all these chatbots, there'll be no connection between the steering wheel and the wheels anymore there either. Um, I would love us to have a list of all the critical things that we have, and to make sure that resources are applied in making sure that they don't fail catastrophically. Um,
For
there's a
sure.
lot of works that have thought about that in the past, but it hasn't gotten a lot of press recently. So just
Right.
one question: what goes wrong? An asteroid hits the Earth. Okay, that's pretty catastrophic. How can we fix that? Um, we get a virus or a worm loose in all of the smart cars in the world. Oh, bad. We have a classic separation from the internet for most of our power utilities, which I think is a pretty good idea. Um,
You would think, right?
well, there's a lot of places that have bypassed that because it is useful to have
Yeah.
connectivity. It's just not useful to have connectivity to everyone. Um,
Right.
so,
Well, it's like you said, it's about redundancy, right? Because, for example, right, the mobile networks do not have five nines requirements, right?
yeah.
So in the event that there is something really bad that's happening, at least we know that the landlines work.
Well, and it's having redundancies. Again, it's landlines versus cell phone towers. You see, there was a major fire in Hawaii, as I recall. Took out all the fiber, but the cell phones mostly got back online in about 3 days. So you see, having multiple ways of recovering from a massive failure, and as
Right.
opposed to having chickens. For example, a tsunami hits California, takes out the entire coastline. What do? Somewhere out there must be a plan. Somebody must have a plan. Does somebody have authority for it? By the way, this is over. This is a conversation over Starlink, and you have been periodically breaking up. Have I been okay for you?
Oh yeah. And actually, for people who are listening that don't know, I'll give a plug to Riverside.fm, which is the application that I use for this podcast. When that happens, it doesn't matter
Oh, okay.
because we're recording
Okay, so it
locally.
records locally.
Oh, but I think
I
this is
hope
the
we are.
first podcast over
Well,
Starlink, though.
yeah, cool. I can
Yeah.
show you a picture of that if you want. Anyway, I wanted on the redundancy thing. So not having immediate redundancy, okay. If you see someone break a string on stage, they have a backup guitar, and some roadie comes out and gives them a new guitar. But we have to know what those redundancies need to be in order for civilization to survive. If we run completely out of food during a disaster, what happens? You know, uh, in California, you are explain when you move here. There's a earthquake survival kit. You're supposed to have at least 2 months of food and water on hand. Most people
Oh, yeah.
don't do that because it's been a really long time since the last big quake. But um, maybe
Yeah, you're
we
right. It
have to
has
keep
been.
to. 89 was the big one. So we talk about teleoperations.
Yeah.
Between here and somewhere else, you need to have consistent low latency to do that, and it needs to be consistent. You can't have telesurgery unless you have consistent low latency. And the internet was truly not designed from the outset to do that.
Right. Right. At all. At all.
Yeah. So maybe we should have another gigantic investment into building truly reliable infrastructure. A $1 trillion project. Somebody can
Right.
take it on.
And the question is, can we do that over IP?
It's really no. it's it's an incredible investment that we've made into a technology that has very obvious limits, and
Right.
we just have to keep struggling on. I like
Yeah.
you talked about redundancy earlier. So there's a technology called multicast TCP, but um, multi TCP. I'm forgetting the right name for it now. But basically, that lets you have a connection over multiple services, and if one fails, or one is faster or slower, it goes over that. It's heavily used by Apple, so that there's almost no transition between when you move from a Wi-Fi access point to a 5G. I think that kind of seamless, redundant technology and all of our stuff will probably get another 9 on the reliability scale for us, and only major disasters will leave us out.
Right, right. And I think that's really great. It's a really, really great point to the industry to realize that because we were talking about how the end user just wants things to work and they don't care which technology it is. That
Yeah.
goes doubly for the fact that they never want it to stop. So that redundancy has to exist, and they also don't care how that works. And so the thing that has always annoyed me is the fight between the companies who are really, really good at one particular technology, where they made their business off of this particular technology. And so they only push that technology rather than trying to understand connectivity holistically and redundantly, right?
No, redundancy has a cost to it. We are fortunate to have two such major wireless technologies at our disposal, with Thread being a third, actually,
Yeah, yeah,
and
for
Bluetooth
sure.
being a fourth, but that's the specialized technology. Um,
Right.
is two enough? I don't know. We have a war going on in the Ukraine, and they are very reliant on Starlink to keep their infrastructure running. But unless you have your infrastructure getting blasted out from you every day, you don't know what your unknown unknowns are. And so we always learn from every plane crash and from every nuclear accident and from every thing, and we keep marching forward. So maybe a better option for us is to try to make sure we contain our disasters.
Right. Right. Right.
So
All right. Well, thanks, dude. I'm
that was
really glad to get you back on because, like I said, it was like I feel like it's like the pressure was building. It was like there was enough stuff happening that I need to talk to Dave again.
well, I don't think much of what I said was truly comforting, but it's good to see you
No,
two
exactly my
face.
point. Right?
And well, I hope we can get back together next year. I'm pretty sure all the current chaos will settle down some, and we'll have a clearer picture of what the future will look like.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll have data back on L4S. We'll have data back on LibreQoS. We'll have some updates on a particular war. We will see more. Um, I don't see civilization collapsing in the next year.
Well, it's like I always say, a slow-moving crisis is not a crisis, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we have a bunch of slow motion crises all coming to a head. We're good from
Oh,
there.
a perfect storm, if you will, which is now the title of this episode.
All right, cool. I'll see you out at sea.
Indeed.
Maybe or maybe not. So go ahead and kill the call if you like.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dave. And I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for having
Cheers.
me.